The dining room fell silent as my grandfather's words cut through Thanksgiving dinner conversation. "I've been sending you $1,400 a month for rent," he said, looking directly at me while my entire family froze mid-chew. My fork clattered onto my plate. "What are you talking about, Grandpa?" I asked, genuinely confused. My parents exchanged terrified glances. My sister Sarah started choking on her cranberry sauce. Grandpa's lawyer, who I'd never met before today, pulled out a manila folder stuffed with bank records. 5 years of transfers, he announced. My world was about to shatter. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before the lawyer, a thin man in his 50s, wearing wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began spreading documents across our dining table. The turkey grew cold as bank statements covered the cranberry sauce stains on Mom's best tablecloth. Mr. Walter Richardson has been transferring $1,400 monthly from his personal checking account to Robert Richardson's account for precisely 60 months. The lawyer announced in a professional tone that made my stomach drop. The transactions began on November 15, 2018, and have continued without interruption through this month. I stared at the highlighted rows of numbers, each one showing the same amount, leaving my grandfather's account on the same day each month. The dates blurred together as my mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I had been paying $800 a month for my cramped studio apartment on the other side of town, scraping together grocery money and walking instead of driving to save on gas. "Walter," my dad said quietly, his voice shaking slightly. "We can explain this." My grandfather, 78 years old, with silver hair and kind blue eyes that now blazed with confusion and hurt, turned to face my father completely. "Robert, I need you to explain why my grandson is sitting here, acting like he doesn't know anything about the money I've been sending to help him with his rent." The lawyer, who had introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, earlier adjusted his glasses and consulted a small notebook. "According to my notes, Mr. Richardson, you established this monthly transfer because your grandson Forrest was experiencing financial difficulties and had contacted you requesting assistance with his living expenses." My head snapped up. "I never asked for money. Grandpa, I swear I never called you about rent money." "But you did, honey," my mother Linda said softly, reaching across the table toward me. Her face had turned a deep shade of red that clashed with her blonde hair. "Don't you remember? It was about 2 years ago. You called your grandfather very upset." My sister Sarah, 25, with dark brown hair like our father's, nodded vigorously while still trying to clear her throat from the cranberry sauce incident. "You were crying, Forrest. You said you might have to move back home because you couldn't afford your place anymore." I felt like I was losing my mind. I absolutely did not make that call. I have never cried to anyone about money, and I definitely never asked Grandpa for help. I looked directly at Walter, my grandfather who had raised my father as a single parent after my grandmother died young. "Grandpa, I promise you, I never called you about rent." Walter's weathered hands trembled slightly as he picked up one of the bank statements. "But you did call Forrest. I remember it clearly because it broke my heart to hear you so distressed. You were sobbing, saying you couldn't make ends meet and didn't know what to do." The call lasted 43 minutes. My father added, pulling out his own phone. "I have the phone records right here. November 8th, 2018, at 9:37 p.m. You called from your cell phone." My stomach dropped as my father showed me his phone screen displaying call logs from 2 years ago. There it was, clear as day, a call from my number to my grandfather's landline, lasting exactly 43 minutes. "I don't understand," I whispered, staring at the evidence. "I don't remember making that call." Mr. Thompson leaned forward slightly. Financial stress can sometimes cause people to block out embarrassing memories. It's not uncommon for individuals to forget moments when they felt particularly vulnerable. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetie, you were drinking that night. You probably just don't remember because you were so upset and had too much wine." The room began to spin as I tried to reconcile what everyone was telling me with my own memories. Could I really have forgotten something so significant? Was it possible that I had been so drunk and upset that I completely blocked out begging my grandfather for money? "I'm sorry," I said quietly, looking at my grandfather's hurt expression. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I don't know why I don't remember, but if everyone says I made that call, then I must have. I'm horrified that I forgot, and I'm even more horrified that you've been sending me money all this time." Walter's expression softened immediately. "Oh, Forrest, don't apologize for needing help. That's what family is for. I just wanted to make sure the money was actually helping you. I'll pay you back." I promised, my voice thick with shame. "Every penny. I'll figure out how to get you back every cent of that $84,000. $84,000, Sarah choked out. Mr. Thompson nodded grimly. $1,400 monthly for 60 months equals $84,000 exactly. As we began cleaning up the dinner dishes in uncomfortable silence, I felt overwhelmed by confusion and embarrassment. How could I have forgotten something so important? How could I have let my grandfather send me money for 5 years without realizing it? I was carrying plates to the kitchen when I heard Sarah talking quietly on her phone in the hallway. "We pulled it off," she was whispering. "He bought the whole story about being drunk." My blood turned to ice water as Sarah's whispered words hit me like a physical blow. I set the plates down on the kitchen counter, as carefully as possible, my hands suddenly shaking with adrenaline. The casual way she said, "We pulled it off," made my stomach clench with a nauseating realization that something was very, very wrong. I crept closer to the hallway, staying hidden behind the kitchen doorway, as Sarah continued her hushed conversation. "Jake, I'm telling you, it worked perfectly. Dad showed him the phone records and everything. Forrest actually apologized to Grandpa for forgetting the call." She paused, listening to whoever Jake was on the other end. No, he completely believed that he was drunk and blocked it out. Mom even cried a little bit about how upset he was that night. My heart hammered against my ribs as the pieces started falling into place. Sarah was talking about fabricating my emotional breakdown call to our grandfather. But why would they lie about something like that? And how did they fake a call from my phone number? "Listen, I have to go," Sarah whispered. "But everything's fine now. Grandpa still thinks Forrest needed the money, and Forrest thinks he just forgot about asking for it." Crisis averted. I backed away from the doorway and stumbled toward the front door, mumbling something about getting fresh air to anyone who might be listening. Once outside, I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic and tried to process what I had just overheard. The phone call was fake. Somehow my family had manufactured a 43-minute conversation between me and my grandfather, complete with tears and pleas for financial help. But the phone records showed the call came from my number. So how was that even possible? I drove to my studio apartment in a daze, my mind racing through possible explanations. Once inside my tiny living space with its second-hand furniture and perpetually broken air conditioning, I pulled out my personal calendar and journal that I had been keeping religiously since college. November 8th, 2018. I flipped to the page and stared at my own handwriting. Double shift at Morrison's restaurant. Got home at 11 p.m. exhausted. Played Call of Duty with Marcus until 2 in the morning. Won 7 straight matches. I had been working a double shift that night, not drinking and crying about money. I remembered that evening clearly now, because Marcus and I had stayed up way too late gaming, and I had been dead tired at work the next day. I immediately called Marcus, my best friend since high school, who answered on the second ring. "Forrest, what's up, man? How was Thanksgiving with the family?" "Marcus, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember November 8th, 2018? We played video games at my place until really late. Dude, that was like 2 years ago. How am I supposed to remember one specific night? Please try." It was a Thursday. I had worked a double shift and came home exhausted, but we stayed up anyway playing Call of Duty. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Oh yeah. Actually, I do remember that night because you kept falling asleep between matches, and I had to keep waking you up. You were dead tired, but didn't want to admit defeat. We played until like 2 in the morning, and you had to work again the next day. Was I upset about anything? Was I drinking? Did I seem worried about money or rent? Hell no, man. You were actually in a great mood, because you had just gotten that small promotion to assistant manager. You kept talking about how you might finally be able to afford a better apartment. Why are you asking about this? I felt a surge of relief mixed with growing anger. I'll explain later. But you're absolutely certain I wasn't upset or drunk that night? Completely certain. You were tired, but happy. We were celebrating your promotion. Remember, I brought over those fancy microwave burritos, and you bought the expensive energy drinks. After hanging up with Marcus, I sat on my lumpy couch and stared at my phone. The call had definitely been made from my number to my grandfather's house, lasting exactly 43 minutes while I was at my apartment playing video games with my best friend. The next morning, I drove to my cell phone carrier's customer service center and waited in line for 20 minutes to speak with a representative. I need detailed information about a specific phone call from November 8, 2018. I told the young woman behind the counter, showing her my identification and account information. She typed rapidly on her computer. Okay, I can see the call you're referring to. 43 minutes to a landline number ending in 4728. Can you tell me what cell tower my phone connected to for that call? She looked puzzled by the request, but checked her system. That's unusual. The call originated from tower number 874 in the Maplewood neighborhood, but your other calls that day came from tower number 219, near downtown. My parents lived in Maplewood. I live downtown. So, my phone was in Maplewood when that call was made. According to our records, yes. The device connected to our Maplewood tower at 9:37 p.m. and remained connected for the duration of the call. I felt sick as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. 2 years ago, I had attended my cousin Jake's birthday party at my parents' house. I distinctly remembered leaving my phone there by accident and having to drive back the next day to pick it up. Someone in my family had used my phone to call my grandfather and pretend to be me crying and begging for money. They had performed a 43-minute emotional manipulation session, making my grandfather believe that his beloved grandson was struggling financially and too proud to ask for help directly. But why? What did my parents need $84,000 for? And why involve me in their lies? I drove straight back to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had always trusted my family completely, never imagining they would be capable of such elaborate deception. When I walked through their front door without knocking, I found my parents and Sarah sitting around the kitchen table with serious expressions, clearly in the middle of an intense conversation that stopped abruptly when they saw me. Forrest, my father said, attempting a smile that looked more like a grimace. What brings you back so soon? I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did one of you use my phone to call Grandpa 2 years ago? The color drained from my mother's face. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Sarah stared down at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. The cell tower data shows my phone was in this neighborhood when that call was made. I continued, my voice steady, despite the rage building in my chest. But I was downtown playing video games with Marcus. I have witnesses and written records proving I wasn't here. The silence in my parents' kitchen stretched for nearly a full minute, before my father finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Forrest, let me explain. No, I said firmly, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Before you explain anything, I want you to answer my direct question. Did one of you take my phone and call Grandpa pretending to be me? My mother started crying, but these weren't the gentle tears from yesterday's dinner. These were loud, messy sobs that shook her whole body. We were going to lose the house, she choked out between gasps. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. Sarah finally looked up at me, her eyes red with shame. We didn't know what else to do. So you decided to steal from Grandpa by lying about me? I asked, my voice rising slightly. My father held up his hands in a gesture that was supposed to be calming. We didn't steal anything. We borrowed it. We're going to pay him back. When? I demanded. When exactly were you planning to pay back $84,000? And more importantly, when were you planning to tell me that you've been using my name to defraud my grandfather for 5 years? It wasn't fraud, Sarah protested weakly. We never said you knew about the money. We let Grandpa believe he was helping you without your knowledge, because he knew you'd be too proud to accept help. I laughed bitterly. That's even worse. You made Grandpa think I was suffering in silence while secretly sending me money, when really you were just stealing it for yourselves. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. Don't you dare call us thieves. We were desperate. Your mother and I both lost hours at our jobs. Sarah's college tuition was more expensive than we anticipated, and the mortgage payment increased when our adjustable rate reset. So you decided to solve your financial problems by manipulating an elderly man who trusts you. We manipulated you too, Sarah said quietly, immediately covering her mouth as if she hadn't meant to speak. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean you manipulated me too? My parents exchanged a look that I had never seen before, filled with panic and guilt. My mother wiped her nose with a tissue and took a shaky breath. Forrest, your father and I have been monitoring your bank account since you turned 18. We never removed ourselves as joint account holders when you became an adult. The room started spinning again. You've been watching my finances for 10 years. We just wanted to make sure you were okay, my father said defensively. And when we saw how well you were doing, how much you were saving each month, we knew you weren't struggling the way we told Grandpa. You've been spying on my private financial information for a decade. I repeated slowly, trying to process the violation. You know exactly how much money I make, how much I spend, where I shop, everything. We're your parents, my mother said, as if that explained everything. We worry about you. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, my fingers moving with mechanical precision. I'm removing both of you from my account right now. This is absolutely insane. Forrest, please don't be hasty, my father pleaded. We can work this out as a family. Family. I stared at him in disbelief. You think family members spy on each other and commit fraud using each other's identities? Sarah burst into fresh tears. We never meant for it to go this far. It was only supposed to be for a few months until we got back on our feet. 5 years, Sarah. You took money from our grandfather for 5 years. And not just any money, but money he thought he was sending to help me. I stood up and walked to their kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where I had played as a child. Everything felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that my parents had been living a lie for years. How much other money have you taken from Grandpa? I asked without turning around. The silence behind me was deafening. Answer me. There have been other situations where we needed help, my father admitted reluctantly. I turned around to face them. What kind of situations? Medical bills, car repairs, that time the water heater broke. My mother listed off quickly. Normal family emergencies. Were they real emergencies? More silence. Were they real? I asked again, louder this time. Sarah's voice was barely audible. Some of them. I felt like I might throw up. You've been running cons on your own father for years. We prefer to think of it as creative problem solving, my father said weakly. Dad, that's literally the definition of fraud. You've been committing elder abuse against your own father. My mother's face crumpled. Don't say that. We love your grandfather. No, you love his money. If you loved him, you wouldn't be lying to him and stealing from him. I walked toward the front door, needing to escape before I said something I would regret forever. Where are you going? My father called after me. I'm going to figure out how to fix this mess you've created, and I'm going to make sure Grandpa knows the truth. Forrest, wait. Sarah jumped up and ran after me. You can't tell him. It would break his heart. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. His heart is going to be broken either way. The only question is whether it gets broken by the truth or by finding out later that his family has been lying to him for years. "But what about us?" my mother asked desperately. "What about our house?" I looked at my parents and sister, these people who had raised me and loved me and taught me right from wrong, and felt a profound sadness for how far they had fallen. "You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from Grandpa," I said quietly. "And you definitely should have thought about it before you dragged me into your lies." I left their house and drove aimlessly around town for 2 hours, trying to figure out what to do next. Eventually, I found myself parked outside my Uncle Daniel's house. Daniel was my grandfather's other son, my father's younger brother, and someone I had always respected for his honesty and integrity. If anyone could help me figure out how to handle this situation, it would be Uncle Daniel. I sat in my car outside Uncle Daniel's modest 2-story house for 15 minutes, gathering the courage to knock on his door and admit that my family were thieves. The evening air was getting cold, and I could see warm light glowing from his living room windows where he was probably watching television with his wife Beth and their twin daughters. Daniel answered the door in his usual weekend uniform of jeans and a flannel shirt, his face lighting up with genuine surprise and pleasure when he saw me. "Forrest, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in. Beth just made coffee." I followed him inside, breathing in the comforting smells of coffee and Beth's famous snickerdoodle cookies. Their house always felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos and tension that seemed to follow my immediate family everywhere. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Beth observed, setting down her book and studying my face with concern. "Is everything all right?" I sat down heavily on their couch and tried to figure out where to begin. "I need to tell you something about my parents and Sarah, but I'm not sure you're going to believe me." Daniel and Beth exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. "Try us," Daniel said quietly. I told them everything. The fake phone call, the monthly transfers, the financial spying, the years of manufactured emergencies. I showed them the cell tower data and played them the voicemail Marcus had sent confirming my whereabouts that night. By the time I finished, Beth was shaking her head in disgust, and Daniel looked utterly unsurprised. "You don't seem shocked," I said to my uncle. Daniel sighed heavily and rubbed his forehead. "Forrest, I've been suspicious about your father's financial requests for years. Your grandfather is constantly worried about Robert's money problems, but your dad has a good job and should be making decent money." "What kind of requests?" "Emergency dental work that cost $4,000 a car transmission, that needed replacing for $3,500 medical bills that insurance supposedly didn't cover." Daniel ticked them off on his fingers. Always urgent, always exactly the kind of amount that would make Dad feel guilty for hesitating. Beth got up and walked to a small desk in the corner of the living room. She returned with a notebook that she set on the coffee table between us. "I've been keeping track," she said apologetically. "I know it seems paranoid, but something always felt off about the timing and amounts." I opened the notebook and felt my jaw drop. Page after page of carefully recorded dates, amounts and explanations for money requests spanning back over 8 years. The total amount was staggering. $17,000 for Sarah's unexpected freshman year expenses that weren't covered by financial aid. I read aloud. $12,000 for roof repairs after the surprise hailstorm. $22,000 for Linda's emergency gallbladder surgery that insurance refused to cover fully. "The thing is," Daniel said grimly, "I called their insurance company about the gallbladder surgery. Pretended I was calling on behalf of my brother to understand the coverage. The surgery was covered at 85%, which would have left them with a bill of maybe $2,000, not $22,000. I felt sick. "How much total are we talking about here?" Beth had already calculated it. "Including the rent money they've been stealing in your name, we estimate Robert's family has taken approximately $237,000 from your grandfather over the past 8 years. $237,000, I repeated numbly. "And that's just what we know about," Daniel added. There could be cash gifts or other transfers that Dad never mentioned to me. I stared at the notebook, trying to wrap my head around the scope of my family's betrayal. Why didn't you tell Grandpa about your suspicions? Daniel's expression darkened. I tried about 3 years ago. I went to Dad with some gentle questions about Robert's financial situation, and he accused me of being jealous because Robert needed more help than my family did. Grandpa said that he said I was trying to turn him against his son because I was bitter about Robert getting more attention. Daniel's voice was heavy with old hurt. He asked me not to bring it up again unless I had proof, which I didn't have at the time. Beth leaned forward intently. But now we do have proof thanks to your investigation. There's something else you need to know, Daniel said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Dad updated his will 6 months ago. He's leaving everything to Robert's family because he believes they need the financial help more than we do. The room started spinning again. Everything? The house, the savings accounts, the life insurance money, everything. He told me he plans to announce the change at Christmas dinner next month because he wants to make sure Robert's family knows they'll be taken care of. I felt like I was going to be sick. So they're not just stealing his money. Now they're positioning themselves to inherit everything when he dies. It gets worse, Beth said quietly. Daniel's father has been talking about taking out a reverse mortgage on his house to give Robert's family more money to help with ongoing expenses. A reverse mortgage? But that's his house. He's lived there for 40 years. Robert has been pressuring him, saying the family needs more consistent financial support, and that the house is just sitting there, accumulating equity that could be helping people right now. I put my head in my hands. This is so much worse than I thought. Daniel leaned back in his chair, looking older than his 45 years. Forrest, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Do you think your father is capable of trying to get Dad declared mentally incompetent so he can take control of his finances? The question hit me like a physical blow. You think Dad would do that? I think your father has already demonstrated that he's willing to commit fraud and elder abuse to get money from his father. Taking control of Dad's finances through legal manipulation would just be the next logical step. Beth nodded grimly. Especially now that your grandfather is starting to ask questions about where all the money is going. I thought about my father's behavior over the past few years, how he had become increasingly concerned about Grandpa's memory problems and confusion about financial matters. Things that had seemed like normal adult children worrying about an aging parent suddenly took on a much more sinister tone. We need to stop this, I said firmly. All of it. The stealing, the lying, the inheritance manipulation. We need to tell Grandpa everything. I agree, Daniel said. But we need to be smart about how we do it. If we just walk in and start making accusations, Robert will deny everything and make us look like the bad guys who are trying to turn Dad against his son. What do you suggest? Daniel and Beth looked at each other clearly, having already discussed this possibility. We need irrefutable evidence, Beth said. Documentation that even Robert can't explain away. And we need a witness, Daniel added. Someone neutral who can verify what we're saying. I thought about Mr. Thompson, my grandfather's lawyer, who had been present for yesterday's revelation. What about Grandpa's lawyer? He seemed concerned about the rent money situation. That's perfect, Daniel said, sitting up straighter. If we can get him on our side, he can help us present the evidence in a way that protects Dad legally, while making sure Robert faces consequences. But first, Beth said seriously, we need to make sure your grandfather is safe. If Robert realizes that we're onto him, there's no telling what he might do to accelerate his plans. The thought of my father becoming desperate and dangerous had never occurred to me. But as I sat in my uncle's living room, surrounded by evidence of years of financial abuse, I realized I didn't really know what my father was capable of anymore. We need to move fast, I said. How quickly can we get a meeting with Mr. Thompson? Daniel was already reaching for his phone. Let me call him right now. Mr. Thompson agreed to meet with us the following evening at his law office. a small but professional suite in a converted Victorian house downtown. Daniel and I arrived 30 minutes early, both of us carrying folders full of documentation and evidence we had spent the entire day organizing. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and leather with diplomas and legal certifications covering one wall and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining another. Mr. Thompson gestured for us to sit in the comfortable chairs across from his mahogany desk. "Gentlemen, I have to admit that yesterday's dinner revelation left me with some concerns about your family's financial arrangements." He began adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "When you called to request this meeting, I wasn't entirely surprised." Daniel leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, we have reason to believe that my brother Robert has been systematically defrauding our father for several years, and that the rent money situation is just the tip of the iceberg." "Those are serious allegations," the lawyer said carefully. "What evidence do you have?" I opened my folder and began laying out documents on his desk. Phone records proving that I didn't make the call requesting rent money. Cell tower data showing my phone was at my parents' house when the call was made, and witness testimony confirming my whereabouts that evening. Mr. Thompson examined each document thoroughly, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Daniel produced Beth's notebook and his own collection of documentation. This shows a pattern of suspicious financial requests going back 8 years, including medical bills that were exaggerated and emergency expenses that may have been entirely fabricated. I've also been concerned about the frequency and amounts of these requests, Mr. Thompson admitted. "In my 40 years of practice, I've rarely seen an adult child require such consistent financial assistance without there being underlying issues like gambling addiction or substance abuse." "Has my brother asked you to help with any legal proceedings regarding my father's mental competency?" Daniel asked. The lawyer's expression grew grave. "Robert has suggested that your father might benefit from having a power of attorney arrangement given his age and what Robert describes as increasing confusion about financial matters." My heart sank. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I've seen no evidence of mental incompetence in your grandfather, and that any such determination would require medical evaluation and court proceedings. I also told him that I would need to speak with your grandfather directly about his wishes before proceeding with any power of attorney documents." "When was this conversation?" Daniel asked. 2 weeks ago. Robert was quite insistent that something needed to be done soon to protect your father's assets from what he called poor financial decisions." Daniel and I exchanged a look. "What kind of poor financial decisions?" Mr. Thompson consulted his notes. "According to Robert, your grandfather has been giving money to various family members without keeping proper records and has been considering some questionable investment opportunities that could jeopardize his retirement security." "That's rich," I said bitterly. "Dad's concerned about Grandpa making poor financial decisions while he's been stealing from him for years." "There's something else," Mr. Thompson said hesitantly. "Robert has been pressuring your grandfather to take out a reverse mortgage on his home. He's scheduled a meeting with a reverse mortgage company for next Tuesday." Daniel shot up from his chair. "Next Tuesday? That's only 4 days away. Robert told your grandfather that the reverse mortgage would provide steady monthly income to help support the family members who are struggling financially." "By family members, he means himself," I said angrily. Mr. Thompson nodded grimly. "I advised your grandfather against the reverse mortgage, but Robert has been very persuasive. He's painted a picture of a family in crisis that needs immediate financial intervention." "What would happen if Grandpa signs those papers?" Daniel asked. "He would receive a lump sum of money based on the equity in his home, but he would also be giving up ownership of the property. When he dies, the house would belong to the mortgage company instead of being part of his estate." I felt sick realizing how close my father was to stealing my grandfather's home, as well as his savings. "Can you stop the meeting?" "Not legally. Your grandfather is competent to make his own financial decisions. But I can certainly advise him of the potential consequences and suggest that he discuss the matter with other family members before proceeding." Daniel sat back down, looking determined. Mr. Thompson, we need your help to present this evidence to my father in a way that protects Dad legally while making sure Robert faces appropriate consequences. The lawyer steepled his fingers and considered our request. What you're describing could constitute elder financial abuse, which is both a civil and criminal matter in this state. If we can prove systematic fraud, Robert could face felony charges. What do we need to do? First, I recommend that we schedule a family meeting, where all of this evidence can be presented in a controlled environment. I would like to be present as your grandfather's legal representative to ensure that his interests are protected. When I asked, as soon as possible, given the timeline pressure from the reverse mortgage meeting, can we arrange something for this weekend? Daniel nodded. I'll call Dad and tell him we need to have a family discussion about financial matters. I won't give him any specifics that might allow Robert to prepare excuses. Mr. Thompson made notes on his legal pad. I'll also need to contact the reverse mortgage company to inform them that there are concerns about undue influence and potential fraud. That should at least delay any proceedings until this matter is resolved. What about the money that's already been stolen? I asked. If we can prove fraud, Robert would be legally obligated to make restitution. If he can't or won't pay voluntarily, we could pursue civil recovery through the courts. And criminally? That would be up to the district attorney's office. But given the amounts involved and the systematic nature of the fraud, I would expect them to take it very seriously. As we prepared to leave, Mr. Thompson pulled me aside. Forrest, I want you to understand that this process is going to be very difficult for your grandfather. Learning that his son has been stealing from him for years will be heartbreaking regardless of how gently we present the information. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I know. But he deserves to know the truth, and he deserves to be protected from further abuse. Agreed. And I want you to know that your grandfather speaks about you often, and with great pride. The fact that you're willing to stand up for him even against your own immediate family says a lot about your character. As Daniel and I walked out to our cars, I felt a strange mixture of determination and dread. We were finally going to expose my family's years of lies and theft, but the process was going to destroy relationships and break hearts in ways that might never heal. Are you ready for this? Daniel asked. I thought about my grandfather sitting alone in his house, believing that his family loved and respected him, while they systematically stole from him and planned to take his home. I'm ready, I said. The family meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at my grandfather's house. Daniel and I spent Friday morning organizing our evidence into a clear chronological presentation that would be impossible for my father to deny or explain away. Beth had created a timeline showing every suspicious financial request over the past 8 years, cross-referenced with public records, insurance claims, and other documentation that proved the requests were either exaggerated or completely fabricated. The pattern of deception was overwhelming when laid out in black and white. Look at this, I said, studying the timeline. Every single major expense coincides with either a vacation they took, a luxury purchase they made, or a credit card payment that would have been due around the same time. Daniel pointed to a cluster of entries from 3 years ago. The $22,000 gallbladder surgery request came 2 weeks after they bought that new SUV. The $12,000 roof repair request was right before their cruise to the Caribbean. And the timing of the rent money setup, I added. November 2018 was exactly when Sarah started her sophomore year at that expensive private college. We had also discovered through careful examination of social media posts and public records that many of the emergencies had been completely fabricated. The hailstorm that supposedly damaged their roof had actually occurred 3 counties away and never touched their neighborhood. The dental emergency that cost $4,000 had been elective cosmetic work that my mother had posted about excitedly on Facebook. Mr. Thompson arrived at my grandfather's house at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a briefcase full of legal documents and a small recording device. This is standard procedure for financial elder abuse cases. He explained, setting up the recorder on my grandfather's dining room table. We need to create a clear record of any admissions or confessions. My grandfather looked older and more frail than I remembered, his usually bright eyes clouded with confusion and sadness. I still don't understand why we're having this meeting, he said quietly. Robert assured me that everything with the rent money was just a misunderstanding. Daniel and I looked at each other. We hadn't told our grandfather the specific reasons for the meeting, just that there were family financial matters that needed to be discussed with everyone present. Dad, we're going to explain everything, Daniel said gently. But we wanted everyone to be here, so there wouldn't be any confusion about what's been happening. At exactly 2:30, my parents and Sarah arrived together, all wearing expressions that tried to convey casual normalcy, but failed miserably. My father's face was flushed, and my mother kept wringing her hands nervously. Walter, you look wonderful, my mother said, kissing my grandfather on the cheek with forced cheerfulness. How are you feeling today? Confused, my grandfather answered honestly. But hopefully that will clear up soon. Mr. Thompson stood up and activated the recording device. This meeting is being recorded for legal purposes. Everyone present has been made aware of the recording, and anyone who objects should speak now. No one objected, though my father's face turned an interesting shade of green. Robert. Mr. Thompson began formally. We've discovered some irregularities in the financial assistance you've received from your father over the past several years. Before we present our evidence, would you like to explain the $1,400 monthly transfers that have been going to your account for 5 years? My father straightened up, trying to project confidence. As we discussed yesterday, that money was for Forrest's rent assistance. My son called his grandfather asking for help, and Walter generously agreed to provide it. When did this call take place? Mr. Thompson asked. November 8, 2018, at approximately 9:30 p.m. Can you describe the content of the call? My father glanced at my mother before answering. Forrest was extremely upset, crying, saying he couldn't afford his rent and might have to move back home. Walter was heartbroken and immediately offered to help. Mr. Thompson made notes on his legal pad. And where was Forrest when he made this call? At his apartment, I assume. That's where the call came from. Actually, I interjected, the call came from your house. I spread out the cell phone records and tower data on the table. These records show that my phone was connected to the Maplewood Tower during that call, not the downtown tower near my apartment. The call was made from your neighborhood, not mine. My father stared at the documents, his mouth opening and closing silently. Furthermore, Daniel added, Forrest has witnesses and written records proving he was at his apartment that evening, working and spending time with friends. He was neither drunk nor upset about financial matters. Sarah started crying quietly, but these weren't the manipulative tears from our previous confrontations. These were tears of genuine shame and fear. My grandfather looked confused. I don't understand. If Forrest didn't make the call, then who did? Mr. Thompson consulted his notes. Robert, did you or any member of your immediate family use Forrest's phone to call your father on November 8, 2018? The silence stretched for nearly 2 minutes before my mother finally broke down completely. We were going to lose the house, she sobbed. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings and we didn't know what else to do. Linda, my father said sharply, but she continued talking through her tears. We knew Walter would help if he thought Forrest needed money, but Forrest would never ask for help himself. So when we found his phone at the house after Jake's birthday party, Robert suggested we call and pretend to be Forrest. My grandfather's face went completely white. You pretended to be my grandson. We knew you'd want to help, my father said defensively. We just made it easier for you to do what you wanted to do anyway. By lying to me, my grandfather said quietly. Daniel opened Beth's notebook and spread the timeline across the table. Dad, this shows 8 years of suspicious financial requests. Emergency dental work that was actually cosmetic procedures, medical bills that insurance covered roof damage from storms that never hit their neighborhood. My grandfather studied the timeline with growing horror. $237,000. And that's just what we can document, I added. There may have been cash gifts or other transfers that weren't recorded. Mr. Thompson leaned forward. Walter, did you know that Robert has been pressuring you to take out a reverse mortgage on your home? He said it would provide steady income to help family members who are struggling, my grandfather said slowly. The reverse mortgage would give you a lump sum of money, but you would lose ownership of your house. When you die, the house would belong to the mortgage company instead of being part of your estate. My grandfather turned to look at my father with an expression I had never seen before. It was a mixture of heartbreak, betrayal, and deep disappointment that seemed to age him 10 years in 10 seconds. Robert, is this true? Have you been stealing from me for 8 years? My father's composure finally cracked completely. We never meant for it to go this far. It was supposed to be temporary, just until we got back on our feet financially. But you never intended to pay me back, did you? My grandfather asked. We were going to pay you back, Sarah said desperately. We still can. We'll get jobs. We'll sell things. We'll figure out a payment plan. With what money? Daniel asked harshly. You've spent everything on luxuries and vacations, while letting your father believe he was helping his struggling grandson. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. Walter, I need to inform you that what Robert's family has done constitutes elder financial abuse, which is both a civil and criminal matter. You have the right to pursue legal action if you choose to do so. My grandfather sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the evidence spread across his dining room table. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I trusted you with everything. I would have given you money if you had simply asked for help honestly. We knew that, my mother whispered. But we were ashamed of our financial problems, and we didn't want to admit we had made so many mistakes. So instead, you made me an unwitting participant in your lies, my grandfather said. You made me believe my grandson was suffering, while you used my love for him to steal from me. The weight of my family's betrayal settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. Everything felt different now, tainted by years of deception and manipulation that could never be completely undone. But as I looked at my grandfather's heartbroken face, I also felt a growing sense of determination. We were going to fix this, whatever it took. The silence in my grandfather's dining room stretched until it became unbearable. My father sat slumped in his chair, no longer trying to maintain any pretense of innocence. My mother continued crying softly, but she had stopped trying to justify their actions. Sarah stared at the table, occasionally glancing up at our grandfather with expressions of profound shame. Mr. Thompson organized the evidence documents into neat stacks and consulted his legal notes. Walter, before we discuss next steps, I need to ask you directly. Do you want to pursue criminal charges against Robert's family for elder financial abuse? My grandfather looked older than his 78 years, as he considered the question. If I don't press charges, will they pay the money back? Dad, my father said quickly, we'll absolutely pay everything back. We just need some time to figure out how. How much time? Mr. Thompson asked. And what's your plan for generating $237,000 in restitution? My father's face reddened. We'll sell the house if we have to. The house that you would have lost to foreclosure if you hadn't been stealing from your father, Daniel pointed out. The house that you've been paying for with stolen money for 5 years. We'll get second jobs, Sarah offered desperately. I'll drop out of school and work full-time. I felt a surge of anger at their continued attempts to manipulate the situation. You can't just get part-time jobs and pay back $250,000. This isn't like paying off a credit card. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair and addressed my grandfather directly. Walter, in cases like this, I typically recommend civil recovery rather than criminal prosecution, unless the perpetrators show no remorse or refuse to cooperate with restitution efforts. What would civil recovery involve? My grandfather asked. Robert's family would be required to pay back the full amount, plus interest and legal fees. If they can't pay immediately, we would establish a formal payment plan with legal enforcement mechanisms. And if they don't stick to the payment plan, then we could pursue criminal charges and asset seizure. My grandfather turned to face my father directly. Robert, I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me honestly, if we hadn't discovered this scheme, would you have continued taking money from me indefinitely? My father couldn't meet his eyes. Dad, we were going to tell you eventually. That's not what I asked. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before my father finally answered. Probably. Yes. We probably would have continued. And the reverse mortgage? We needed more consistent income, my mother admitted quietly. So you were planning to take my house too? We were planning to help you access the equity in your house, my father said weakly. Daniel laughed bitterly. Help him access equity that would have gone to your children when he died. You were stealing their inheritance too. My grandfather stood up slowly and walked to the window overlooking his backyard. This was the house where he had raised his two sons, as a widowed father, working two jobs to make sure they had everything they needed. The betrayal had to be devastating. Mr. Thompson, my grandfather said without turning around, I want you to draw up a formal restitution agreement. Robert's family will pay back every penny they've taken, plus interest, plus your legal fees. What timeline would you like to establish? 6 months for the full amount. Dad, my father protested, 6 months is impossible. Then you should have thought about that before you spent 8 years stealing from me, my grandfather replied firmly. 6 months, or I press criminal charges and let the district attorney handle it. Mr. Thompson made notes on his legal pad. I'll also recommend that we establish a restraining order preventing any member of Robert's family from requesting money from you or attempting to influence your financial decisions. And I want Daniel added to all my bank accounts so that any future transactions over $1,000 require his approval. Walter, my father said desperately, you're punishing us forever for a mistake. My grandfather turned around and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, his voice carried the strength and authority I remembered from my childhood. Robert, you didn't make a mistake. You made thousands of deliberate choices to lie to me and steal from me over the course of 8 years. You involved my grandson in your schemes without his knowledge. You were planning to take my house. You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could control my finances completely. We never actually filed papers for the incompetency, my mother said weakly. Because you ran out of time, not because you decided it was wrong. Sarah finally looked up from the table. Grandpa, what about our family? What about holidays and birthdays and normal family relationships? My grandfather's expression softened slightly. Sarah, I still love all of you, but I can't trust you anymore. And trust is the foundation of any relationship. You'll have to earn that back slowly over time with consistent, honest behavior. How do we do that? She asked. By paying back the money you stole. By getting jobs and working hard instead of looking for easy solutions. By taking responsibility for your actions instead of making excuses. Mr. Thompson stood up and began packing his documents into his briefcase. I'll have the restitution agreement drawn up by Monday. Robert, I'll need documentation of your assets and income to establish a realistic payment schedule within the 6-month time frame. What if we can't come up with all the money? My mother asked. Then, you'll face criminal charges for elder financial abuse, which carries potential prison sentences of up to 10 years in this state. As everyone prepared to leave, I lingered to speak with my grandfather privately. Grandpa, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry they used my name to hurt you. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. Forrest, you have nothing to apologize for. You're the one who discovered the truth and had the courage to expose it. That takes strength and integrity. I should have figured it out sooner. How could you? You trusted your family just like I did. There's nothing wrong with trusting the people who are supposed to love you. Are you going to be okay? My grandfather looked around his house, the place where he had built a life, and raised his children, and welcomed his grandchildren for family gatherings. I'm going to be fine. I have Daniel and Beth and their girls, and I have you. Most importantly, I have the truth now, which is worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. 6 months later, my family had managed to pay back roughly half of what they owed by selling their house, liquidating their retirement accounts, and both my parents taking second jobs. They moved into a small rental apartment and established a payment plan for the remaining balance. Sarah dropped out of her expensive private college and enrolled in community college while working part-time to contribute to the restitution payments. It took them nearly 3 years to pay back the full amount, but they did it. My relationship with my immediate family slowly began to heal, but it would never be the same. Trust once broken so completely doesn't repair easily or quickly. We see each other at holidays and special occasions, but the easy intimacy we once shared is gone. My grandfather moved in with Daniel's family for safety and companionship, where he enjoys helping with homework and teaching his granddaughters to play chess. He still talks about the financial abuse incident, but more as a lesson learned than as a source of ongoing pain. The experience taught me that protecting the people you love sometimes means standing up to family members who abuse that love. It taught me that financial elder abuse is more common than most people realize, and that predators often come from within the family circle where trust is assumed and rarely questioned. Most importantly, it taught me that truth and integrity matter more than maintaining comfortable lies, even when revealing the truth causes pain in the short term. If someone in your family is pressuring an elderly relative for money, especially if the requests are frequent, urgent, or don't quite make sense, trust your instincts and ask questions. Elderly people deserve to be protected from financial abuse, whether it comes from strangers or from their own children. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? How do you balance protecting someone you love while maintaining family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, or if you think it could help someone else recognize the signs of financial elder abuse, please like this video and share it with your friends and family. And if you want to hear more stories about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, make sure to subscribe to my channel for new content every week. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you understand that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the most important thing to do. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the elderly people in your life who depend on your protection and respect.